Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, we are talking about the fiscal outlook, the legislative analyst office, their fiscal outlook. We've got one of our great friends here on the show to talk about finances here in the state of California.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazwata, ACSA's executive director. I'm Naj Alikan, ACSA's senior director of marketing and communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you back here on this side of the Thanksgiving holiday. Go ahead and jump onto the chat and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from today. Edgar, how was your holiday?
It was great. It was great, Naj. It was good to spend a little bit of time. Obviously, family, food. You know, I think we've talked about this. Thanksgiving is definitely one of, if not my favorite of holidays. You don't have to deal with the gifts or it's just enjoying time together. And I see, and appreciating those time together. I'm seeing Nuri's commenting on our beards, right? Like, and it was funny because I think I may have told the story, but just recently. And we were just talking backstage about our kids getting older and just the differences. Michael talks about my son, as we noted, when he was little at the start of the program, pulling out earbuds and whatnot, like his memorable moment. Well, one of the things he told me the other day, I was in the sun and he's like looking at me, but he's all like, "Oh, your beard has a lot of white in it, right?" And so one of the things that I thought of right now as Nuri puts on this comment, we're going to have to check out those back in the day pictures of our broadcast. Let's see. Well, we'll have a competition.
I was going to say,
my beard is getting more gray in it here.
Michael, look at that. See, look at that.
We didn't even plan this. We didn't even talk that we were going to go here, and somehow Michael pops
that right up. There you go. Neri, what do you think? After
we were trying to intimidate people. I think if nothing else from those mugs, those poses. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about this.
Picture right there depicts you don't want.
I think we look better with age. I don't know.
I would like to think that we look better with age. That's for sure. The beards certainly work. The different hair. I mean, I think, and again, I think we look like you don't want to mess with us in a back alley when you've got that former picture up. So yes, again, happy to have you with us. I do want to point out, we are going to be talking about finance today, and that, of course, brings out some members or former members that we don't often see, but they are finance focused. And I want to just point out here, Sheldon Smith, who is one of our longtime members and a finance guru, is listening while on a training ride. I'm assuming that's on a bike somewhere, that training ride, but he is watching while doing that simultaneously.
I think all of our retirees, when they throw out, I think they're just doing it to kind of punk our other active members, right? I'm watching from the beach, I'm watching from a long bike ride, and I really do think they listen, if nothing else, obviously to interact with their former colleagues, but also to just say, I don't have to deal with all those problems anymore. So
you know what? It's funny that you said that, because as soon as you said that, I went down to the chat to see where Gail Olson was, and there's Gail Olson watching in from Mexico today, another one of our retirees. So good call on that. Folks, we've got our good friend Megan Baier coming up on the show to talk a little bit about the fiscal outlook here in California. Want to hit two stories real quick. And Edgar, you and I were just mentioning this ahead of the show. Carolyn Jones over at EdSource, a great article where she's quoting some research that's come from UCLA, UC Riverside, and the University of Texas on the cost of conflict in school districts. Now, what these researchers did was survey nearly 500 superintendents in 46 states. Now, these are K through 12 districts in 46 states. And try to figure out what is the fiscal impact, the cost of conflict among policies in their communities like parental rights, race, racism, book bans. The data point for the cost of these conflicts, $3.2 billion. And that includes added security at board meetings and legal fees. Now, here's a couple of other data points, Edgar, and I'll have you respond to this. Among the cost of conflict, that on the educator pool, one district spent nearly $500,000 due to conflict-related staff turnover. And half of the superintendents surveyed said they were personally harassed. 10% said they were threatened with violence, and 11% had property vandalism. Superintendent retirement during a 4-year span ending in 23-24 went up 3% nationally, with 40% of those responding saying that they left their jobs over the last year and their decision to leave was impacted by conflict in their school communities, along with stress in politics. Edgar, I'll get your thoughts on this because I know you're going to be at the CSBA conference this week. Of course, you can read this article over at EdSource, our great friend Carolyn Jones. Your thoughts, just hearing some data points.
Well, I think the summarizing it, and all the examples that were given, I think topics that we've touched on here on this show over the last couple of years. I would even go back to the COVID related issues, right? And I know that's probably part of the story as well, where some of this age of conflict, I think it was a good way of putting it. So it's interesting. This is an interesting take on it. I hadn't heard it be quantified in terms of dollar terms, but yeah, I could see the correlation there. I could see the argument in terms of it's not just of the impact that it has. And I think there's a lot of research, especially with boards of education, about their collaboration with the district leadership, the superintendent, how that has implications in terms of like the success of the organization for obvious reasons. But this piece about like having fiscal aspects is a new angle to it. Yeah, like you said, I'm actually on a panel this Friday down at the CSBA conference in Anaheim, where this is generally going to be the topic about the rise of maybe boards and folks, different forces in public education, which, it's something that we've all been grappling with on what that looks like. So this is an interesting perspective. I'll do a deep dive on that article as well.
Yeah, should be a good read for all of you. Go ahead and check that out, of course, after the broadcast is done. Also, last month, the LAO released its California fiscal outlook. We're going to be discussing that in just a couple of moments, but a couple of items related specifically to education in the fiscal outlook. The LAO estimates an increase of about $1.5 billion to the Prop 98 guarantee. That's based on growth in the general fund and local property tax revenue. But according to the fiscal outlook, and we'll clear this up with our guest, nearly all of the increases would be deposited back into the state's reserve. Now, aside from the growth in Prop 98 guarantee, there may be some additional funding for lawmakers to use in 25-26, and that's because of the expiration in some one-time dollars, $3.7 billion. Edgar, as there was a lot of data that was in there, and this is that time of year where we start looking towards the budget, and we know there was a discrepancy, I guess we could say that, between what the LAO said during the budget process last year ahead of what the governor's proposal looked like. So you kind of have to look at that and say, yeah, this is the fiscal outlook from the LAO, but the governor's office may see it completely different.
I'm having one of those moments, Naj, where I'm listening to you. You're saying important things. I'm supposed to respond, but all I keep look at is the comments of people like Steve Harvey taking shots at us there. So, but hey, that comes with the territory here. No, to your point, on a serious note, yeah, I think the fiscal piece, and I think we're going to hear. I think perspectives is good here, because I do take some solace on where we thought things were going to stand, even just like last November. And even going into the budget cycle, and Megan for all those months really leading us through those conversations. I think there's some challenges and there's some things, and Megan's going to help us kind of dissect what the LAO is talking about. But I think just net where things we thought the trajectory might be going, even when we had some of those hiccups, it's a mixed bag. But I think there's also some positive news that for us to hang our hats on.
Yeah, I don't know how to gauge Stephen Hovey's comment there about hair on your chin doesn't make up for the lack of hair on your head.
Making fun of our age. I guess he's taking a different perspective of that. We look better with age. So.
I mean, yeah, Jeez, Steven, my goodness, killing us this morning here on the show. All right, well, let's go ahead and bring in our guest, a friend of the show, has co-hosted the show as well, Megan Baier, the Director of Governmental Relations at School Services of California. Our guest, we don't have the reunited music in the background. We probably should have. Because we're so honored to have you.
I guess we made an exception, Naj. I think what happened to we don't allow Megan in for X amount of time. I guess
yeah,
she slipped in there, but okay. Just because it is Megan and we knew how much, the crowd loves her, to the point where we have some of our members listening while on bike rides. I know it's not because of us. It's really because of Megan.
It's apparently it's certainly
Sheldon did not come for us. He came for Megan. So it's good to have Megan back.
Yeah, good to have Megan back. Megan, tell us about your new role over at School Services. What's the transition been like for you?
Well, it's about a 2-block move for me, so I can actually see the ACSA office building from my window. So I can see your offices. Hey, so no, it's been great. It's been wonderful learning from the different experts in every area of finance and school operations over here. But I really do miss ACSA. I've already been to Leadership Summit, and now I'm back on lunch break already. So it's really wonderful to be here and to see all these familiar friends and faces. So thanks for having me,
Megan. Well, one of the things I know you, if nothing else, you've given John Gray has to be extra nice to me. Here for I don't know how long that's gonna last, but at least I've benefited from that. But no, I'm glad you're settling in, Megan, and like we told everybody, you're still part of the extended family here, and I know we've been lucky to have you at a number of our ACSA events here in the short time. So I know one of the things, and when you were here, you were leading us through kind of the analysis. I said one of the things that the Analyst right now projects is that we're going to see a moderate increase in spending in 25-26 in terms of the budget. One, were you surprised by this? Kind of what are your expectations? What's your general? I guess to just start this conversation, what are your general thoughts on what the LAO is throwing out about the prospects of maybe things seeing some spending increases there on the education side?
Well, it certainly feels nice to see the numbers that we're seeing this year rather than where we were last year. Remember last year, the tax receipts just kept going down, 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 and then we had this huge deficit. So that was, really concerning. And while the budget that was adopted kept us very stable, there was a lot of concern, and there were certainly many concerning policy proposals that went out there. So happy to say that that is not the situation that we find ourselves in this year. On a monthly basis, we've been tracking revenues. So, the LAO's fiscal outlook is not entirely surprising. Every month, cash receipts in the various funds have been over what the budget estimated them to be. Remember the budget, they're constantly updating estimates. A lot of this is projections, and it's whether the revenue that comes in actually tracks with those projections. So it's pretty positive. I would just temper that by saying it's modest. It's not, this isn't like in 2021 where we just had this like boom in revenue and we had this huge influx of cash. That's not what we're talking about. We're slightly over where we thought we would be, which is a good place to be. The LAO projects that once the state takes care of all of its current commitments, and assuming that the state wants to take care of all its current commitments, including funding the LCFF COLA, there's about a $2.8 billion surplus. So, it's a good place to be.
Good place to be. Folks, if you have questions for Megan, go ahead and jump into the chat and put those in, and we'll try and tackle some of those near the end of the show. Megan, what is the LAO saying regarding the cost of living adjustment for 25-26?
So the Department of Finance every year has projections for what they believe COLA will be. So many of our school leaders have seen the projected number from the Department of Finance that was at 2.93%. The LAO is predicting a 2.46% COLA. So that's notably lower. I will caution that internally at School Services, we're looking at these numbers. We actually think 2.46 might be a little high. We think it might come down a little closer to 2.2. So just a reminder, the statutory COLA is made up of 8 economic data points. We have 6 of those data points right now. So it'll be another couple months. We won't have an actual statutory COLA till April, when that number will be what actually the formula spits out. But, so you can't take any of these numbers to the bank or anything, but it's certainly not going to be 2.9, and it may even be under where LAO is estimating.
Megan, on that, let me ask you a follow-up on that, because this is something I know you always make a point to bring up, that maybe you could just give us the 101 on how do they come up with the COLA, right? I know sometimes people think that that's just they decide and that's the political process, but which I mean, everything's political, so there is some of that back and forth. But generally speaking, how do they come up with the COLA?
Yeah, generally speaking, it is over the last year they are tracking the rate of growth in the economy. So, we know inflation has still gone up high. That year where we had that huge COLA, that was the year it accelerated. And then last year we had this small COLA, and folks were like, what do you mean? Inflation is still high. Yes, inflation still had knocked prices up for us consumers and for school districts who are trying to purchase, different goods and services. But the COLA is based on economic data points that track the rate of change. So that's what it's really. So are we going to see, a big rate of change or not? And I think the other thing to remember is historically, we've seen a lot of really abnormally high COLAs in recent years. And I think that has kind of skewed our perception of normal. A 2 to 3% COLA would be very average according to historical data. So, this may just usher in the return to more normal COLAs, not those big 8% ones.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. Thanks for that. One of the other issues that the LAO commented on is, I would say, one of your favorite subjects, declining enrollment. One thing that I know you've been helping us kind of make, not just us, the field, navigate what are our options. I know doing some advocacy of the state about mitigating the impact of declining enrollment. What did the LAO have to say, and how is this impacting the bigger education funding landscape?
So LAO talks about what all of you know. The state has declining enrollment. For some districts, it's pretty dramatic. We are seeing a temporary boost for some LEAs, depending on what your student makeup is, because of the phase-in of transitional kindergarten. So we are seeing a little boost there. Next year will be the final phase-in, though, so that boost is going to go away. LAO is predicting that we're going to continue to see declining enrollment into the future. And just one other reminder is that there is some migration out of the state, but really the biggest driver of declining enrollment is that people are having less children. And this has been, a decades-long trend that has continued and accelerated for many. So I think the other thing that's important to note that a lot of districts are going to be grappling with during the COVID years, there were a couple of different I think I cut out for a minute. Stabilized and even out attendance for districts. Those policies are phasing out.
Let's get John Gray to upgrade that internet over there. Come on, come on, John. Let's give the upgrade on the Wi-Fi there.
We spend all of this money on Megan's new headshot, and we can't even pay for the internet at school services. My goodness, John.
I think it's me. Taking care of wherever I go.
No. We're going to blame John. It's kind of like how when Edgar's not here, we blame Edgar for everything. We're going to blame John on this one. Megan, let me ask you about the uncertainty involving federal actions impacting public education. What have you been hearing from clients about this?
Everyone's really nervous. From everything from what are the immigration policies going to mean on school districts and for immigrant families to funding. The feds do provide a lot of funding in a variety of different programs, English learners, special education. Are they going to be looking to do major cutbacks in these areas? So there's a lot of concern. It remains to be seen what the priority is actually going to be. He can't do everything in day one, and there's a lot of different statements out there that kind of conflict. So we'll see. I know a lot of our clients, and I know ACSA is another group that has been gearing up to really put pressure to protect public education and students. So I mean, it's going to be a fight. It seems it'll be a fight to protect our students and protect public education in the coming years.
Yeah, just on that note, Megan, I know one of the pieces that we've already started to hear about it. I'm sure school services will start to hear this is the connection to the last question we just asked about that this could have an impact on ADA, that this could have an impact on attendance specifically. We're actually already seeing that. This is anecdotal. I don't know that we have any data, but not surprisingly, just given the talk about immigration sweeps, about enforcement, that is already causing a lot of fear in certain communities. And as I've said, and we, I think we were on the air the day after the elections, Naj, not just to reiterate it, like our perspective is we're going to pick our battles, right? This is not about who is in DC in charge. This is about what are the issues, what are the things that they're putting out that will potentially impact us, and that we're going to speak out when those do. That's one I would say right now at the top of the list, probably number one of what we're concerned about, the potential impacts, about what is going to be. Is this just talk? Are we going to see aggressive actions? And if so, what is the impact to our school communities? It's going to have an impact on our communities, whether folks are, and then no one, I mean, just to be fair, nobody's talking about, the incoming administration's not talking about ICE sweeps at schools. That's not necessarily that. With that said, I think that's something we have to at least have in the back of our head. But what is the broader, maybe direct or indirect impact of some of these conversations? So yeah, just one thing that we are, like Megan said, we are definitely trying to stay on top of that issue. Megan, one more question from me, and I noted this here at the beginning, just the comparison piece, like you noted this, you alluded to it. We do seem to be in a very different place than when we were maybe last year, or at least the projections. It seemed to be much more pessimistic. I know some of that was just some of the actions that the legislature took. What's your perspective? How much of this has really changed? How much is this just how the issue has been framed? Has the state bounced back that much with the revenues? Why does it feel like the conversation's so different than when we were having a year ago?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think what really put us in a horrible position last year was those delayed tax filings that delayed the actual revenues. And then the state was way too optimistic with the amount of spending that they committed to versus what the revenue that actually came in. So that was really the huge disconnect that we had to grapple with more than everything. And because we had a favorable outcome, in Prop 98 last year, the state stood by education, thankfully, thanks to a lot of ACSA advocacy and other education partners. So I think we're in a better spot because we actually dealt with that problem. And then, yes, there has been a little bit of a pickup in the economy. But again, it's not super dramatic. So we'll see, if these trends hold. And hopefully they do. And hopefully we have a much more positive year this year.
So what I hear, kind of where you started, cautious optimism, but like really emphasis on the cautious, right? Like this is not, the LAO might have a somewhat positive news, but no one's talking about huge increases. This is not what we were seeing just a few years ago with the dramatic increases in revenue and whatnot.
Yeah. And, another piece kind of tangentially to this that, we didn't touch on is, so as attendance declines, that is going to reduce the cost of funding the local control funding formula. So there's potential for resources to be freed up within education. So this is another kind of theme that we may see this year. There was a hearing that Edgar testified in. I pointed the wrong direction, but testified in and was a part of, to think about if there are additional resources in Prop 98. Are we looking at making changes to the local control funding formula, modifications to invest differently, to change the, what is the low income threshold, to change the concentration supplemental? With declining enrollment, there is this opportunity that you could make changes there. Or, you could see the legislature wanting to invest in totally new priorities or new categoricals, right? So there's kind of like a bunch of different possibilities that are created here. And thankfully, Edgar and others and ourselves will be part of that conversation and make sure we shape that. But that's the other thing that we're going to see as LCFF attendance decreases, is there's going to be maybe a little bit of space for new priorities in K-12.
Megan, before we let you go, we made an executive decision while you were still here that we weren't going to put up the photo of Edgar and I from the cornhole tournament up again until you came back on the show, only because you said, great, now we're going to see that photo 7 times. However, we decided since you've only been away from ACSA for like 3 weeks, we're going to delay it a little bit more, but just be prepared that we're still keeping count. We're at 5 right now. And the next time you come, we'll probably force you to put the photo in one of the frames behind you. So that way it will be part of your life forever.
I can keep you close to me at all times. That'd be great.
Go.
Thank you.
Megan Baier, Director of Governmental Relations at School Services of California. Megan, great having you back here on the show, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Edgar, I will just ask you before we close things out, anything in particular from what Megan was giving us as far as data points are concerned? The one that, stuck out to me was the 2.46% COLA and School Services using their 6 data points, thinking it's probably closer to 2.2. But anything in particular that really stood out to you?
I just appreciate, and this is one thing we always love about Megan, that she has this knack for, okay, there's headlines, there's a lot of the numbers, but kind of what's the bottom line here? How is this really good news? And I think she tempered it a little bit, which I think rightly so. I think that's the right approach, while noting that, okay, there's some generally good news as opposed to what we were talking about, but we're going to have to wait and see. And we're going to have to see is this a blip? Like, where do things go? I think that's my biggest takeaway.
All right. Folks, that is our show today as we get ready to hit the bottom of the hour. We are back on the air next week. So don't forget to mark your calendar for that. Thank you again so much for joining us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.